If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, which, trust me, is a lot easier than using a super complicated, super expensive audio editing software. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on every listening platform you can think of, like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. It's everything you need to make your podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. If you can afford organic, it's probably better. It's never going to be worse than non-organic. I think that's probably safe to say. It's not ever going to be worse for you. But if you can't afford it, or if you don't have access to it, more importantly, don't feel like you're, poisoning your family by not buying organic. And welcome back to Foodball. It is I, your chief human, Zach Martin, and my glorious co-host returning after a week off. Tell us about why you were gone, Barb.
I had a kid plague. You know, when you have children, they cough, they sneeze, and that's all they have to do is cough and sneeze. And then you are all of a sudden having lots of diarrhea and puking nonstop for like close to a week. Great diet plan for me getting ready to go to the Dominican Republic, but outside of it, terrible because I like my food.
Indeed, it does make enjoying real food a little bit harder when it's not wanting to stay in and get digested like it's supposed to. But we are excited that you're back. Abigail did a fair dinkum job of subbing in while you were out. So if you're ready to get back into it.
I sure am.
Excellent. So today we are going to be talking about grocery stores, both why they are evil and why they are necessary, and kind of giving some overall general advice on how you should grocery shop. Hopefully most of you are doing these kinds of things already, but there are some helpful hints, things that I didn't know that we learned while doing the research 5 minutes ago for this show. So, we're 100% prepared. We're not just, making this shit up off the top of our heads. There are links, which will be in the episode description. So if you'd like to go read those at your leisure, instead of listening to us at this point in the show, you've already counted us as a listener. So go ahead. I don't give a shit. So Barb is back. We are talking about grocery stores today. There will be no interview on this episode because I have been told that the episodes are getting too long. So I will put an interview out next week in its entirety without any bullshit lead-in, so you don't have to worry about us, and we'll just have interesting people talk about food. Maybe we'll do like an every other week thing. I don't know. Let me know which you prefer. Let us know on Twitter or Instagram at Foodball. See, that's called a natural segue. So leading into our 3 things we do at the beginning of the show and still don't have a name for thing, which is now, I guess, the official name of it because we've done it 3 or 4 times now. We're starting with our food history, talking about grocery stores, as I mentioned at the top of the show. Grocery stores, as we know them, were started in 1916 in Memphis, Tennessee, with the opening of the very first Piggly Wiggly, which is a kind of primarily Southern brand. I grew up with a Piggly Wiggly in town. We would go to The Pig, and that was one of the options along with Food Lion. Prior to the opening of the first Piggly Wiggly in Memphis in 1916, grocery shopping was primarily completed by making a list without, brand names. It was just eggs, milk, cheese, milk again, bread, whatever, handing it to the clerk at the store, and the clerk would go and pick things out and bring them back to you. You would pay for them, and then you would leave. So what Piggly Wiggly did that was different and what kind of created the concept of the grocery store was it was self-service. So you would walk around the shelves and pick out your own items and then pay for them, which some call the birth of like food branding, because for the first time, food manufacturers had to differentiate themselves from the other competing types of the same product. So you got more packaging involved, and we'll get into packaging a little bit later. And then the first supermarket that we would consider a supermarket, the Piggly Wiggly didn't have produce or dairy or anything fresh. It was all just prepackaged and canned and shelf-stable stuff. The first supermarket was opened in 1930 in Queens, New York. It was called King Cullen. They had meat and produce, kind of what we would consider an all-in-one grocery store. So they are either, the concept of a grocery store is either way older than you might think or not nearly as old as you might think. It used to be a way different kind of organization, and now you can kind of see as we go to the Amazon Go completely cashierless experience. They did a great bit about that on Saturday Night Live a couple weeks ago. If you haven't caught it, it was one of the few Saturday Night Lives that I have enjoyed lately. But so we're kind of coming around in a weird way to going back to the clerk style. What I love about Instacart, I think we've all kind of used a delivery service. Did you use Instacart during quarantine?
Oh my God, yeah. I still do sometimes. My husband hates me for. Like, he's like, why can't you just go to the store? Well, sometimes I like to be lazy. Thank you.
And I get that. I find grocery store trips to be exciting because I cook. So I don't look at them as like utilitarian, I have to go get A, B, and C to build thing, because as we've established, I don't look at food as a puzzle or a math problem. It's more like art. So I go to get art supplies. And I think looking at all the different colors of paint is fun, which has the wonderful side effect of we have a kind of joking but totally serious rule in that I am physiologically incapable of spending less than $50 at a grocery store. Like, I can literally go in for milk and come out with $50 of stuff. And we'll get into a little bit of why that is, on top of me being just a cook. But something about Instacart, sometimes I will send Ashley with a grocery list because she's the one driving. She's the one going to pick it up. She needs a break from the kids. And 90% of the time, she gets something wrong. 90% of the time. Even if I specifically say this brand, this size, this thing, she either can't find it and substitute something else or just doesn't get it, or thinks, oh, well, this other thing is fine. So that's one of the things that I both love and hate about something like Instacart is if you have a good shopper, they will say, is this substitution okay? And sometimes you won't have a good shopper and they'll say, I just went ahead and substituted because I know it. And no, they fucked it up. It's the wrong fucking thing. So I've had issues. Have you had issues with like substitutions with anything?
Oh yeah. Like, random thing. I was going to make homemade chicken enchiladas. And I like to use the canned enchilada sauce as a base, just as a base. They got me like, I want to say like tomato paste and something else. I was just like, well, there's this. There goes that.
Yeah, and that's something that's a risk that you take, in that I think we talked about at some point in one of these episodes, we talked about like getting exotic produce and trying to figure out if the checker would have to look it up or not. Like, oh, I wonder if they know what a shallot is or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to, it's kind of like reading a recipe, is you have to have faith in the food knowledge in general of the person who's shopping for you. When some things like at Aldi, for example, there is no selection, or even at Schnucks, like our local regional store. If I go on Instacart for them, there's no option for just garlic. There's no option for bulk, like just pick me up a head of garlic. There's no option for that anywhere. And so like it bugs the shit out of me because that's so simple. Like, why is there not a thing? Like, I would like one head of garlic. So you can get the container of pre-minced or the 3-pack. Always try to avoid the 3-pack. But that's just, it's always bugged me. Like, why is that a thing? So if you use Instacart, kind of winding this up, if you use Instacart, please tip your people, because that's their job and you are making them do a lot of work, especially if you're doing a lot of substitutions and, if you have like a 50 item list and all this stuff. I do not begrudge people for doing grocery delivery because I understand that most people don't look at the grocery store like a field trip like I do. But try to, be nice to your grocery shoppers that are doing you a huge favor. Moving on to probably the biggest part of the show, the food science portion. Actually, no, we're going to skip that. We're going to do the shitty food media of the week first, because the whole rest of the body, the whole rest of the body of the show is basically going to be food science. So the shitty food media of the week comes from, because we like to spread our shitty media, complaints to all food media companies, not just like Tasty, because that's low-hanging fruit and that's kind of an easy target. We'll go, it is. We'll go.
It really is.
That's one of the only reasons I follow Tasty on Twitter, is just so every 20 minutes I can see something else that makes me go, what in the fuck are you people doing?
That and what is it, the 5-minute, what are those stupid 5-minute things that always show up on Twitter and Facebook?
How to make 5-minute lasagna. Yeah. No, that's not, no. So this week's shitty food media comes from The Takeout, and it is an article that came out this week called A Guide to Zero Waste Grocery Shopping. Basically, they write about the concept of grocery stores that are completely packageless, in that everything is available in bulk and people are expected to just bring their own containers and buy. And we see some of this in places like Fresh Time, Whole Foods, health food type stores, where you can go in and get coffee or grains, beans, dry shelf stable stuff. You can, generally those kind of places, you don't bring your own container because it's a sanitation issue, but you fill up containers at the place and you buy in bulk. So the buying in bulk thing is not really anything new. But the concept of the zero waste store is that if there is packaging, it's all either recyclable, reusable, or compostable. But the model is kind of hard to put together in the United States. The article goes on to kind of how to start a zero waste lifestyle. Most places, it says, quote, most places allow you to bring in anything you want when it comes to reusable containers. Don't be scared to use this opportunity to give new life to any non-recyclable takeout containers. Okay, why don't you just use those at home like Tupperware, like normal people do? There is no shame in buying quality deli meat in the Tupperware style container, taking the label off of it and just using it as Tupperware. Even if you use it once or twice, it's still better than going and buying new Tupperware and contributing to more plastic waste. But the biggest thing, and it mentions this in the article, the biggest hurdles to zero waste living, obviously with these kind of stores, packaging is used to market. The things like Malto Meal cereal is famously, just as quality as your national brand, but they don't pay for cardboard packaging. There's not a bunch of logos and giveaways and nonsense, so it ends up being cheaper. But with a zero waste store like they're talking about in this article, they are also, not only just buying, they're not buying cheap rice and then just putting it in a big bucket. They're also buying super high quality rice that are sustainable. It goes sustainable up the chain. So not only is it, more expensive because it's a better quality product, but also the shipping is different because you can't just stack a bunch of boxes in a truck. So it ends up being even more expensive at the end of it. So I think, and I don't know if you agree with me on this, but from a hippy dippy kind of sustainability quality standpoint, I think it's a wonderful idea. From a classist food desert contributing thing, I think it's a terrible idea. So what would you say?
It's hard. When you read anything about it, there's a lot of pros. You can simply find the pros, but for me, I'm one of those people that I see the cons of, I think everybody can be dirty. And now I have this cross-contamination. I just think about people like that. Are you actually going to wash your hands or put on gloves before you touch this food to get the rice or get these lentils? I am freaking out just by I can't get past that. I love the idea of creating less waste because of the fact when Zach and I were reading about this, I found that supermarkets account for 10% of all the US food waste, which equals 43 billion pounds of waste. And then the packaging from the food is 23% of our landfill waste. So there's a lot of good with coming with creating a zero waste grocery store when you look at how much waste the stores are putting out.
And that's a good point with the cross contamination and people being filth monsters. I think COVID has taught us that people as a whole can't be trusted to not be filth monsters. And I think all of us, if we're honest with ourselves, have plucked a grape off of a bunch of grapes and ate it and not planned on buying the bunch of grapes, whether we were adults or children. That's why I won't buy grapes with my kids at the store anymore, because they can't be trusted to just not eat the whole thing before we get to the checkout. That's another side anecdote. I don't know if you ever watched like the extreme couponer shows.
Yes.
One of my favorite ones that I remember was the woman who picked every single grape off of the stems because the grapes are priced per pound, and she didn't want to pay for the stems. She only wanted to pay for the actual grapes, which saved her a cent or two per pound of grapes because grape stems are not particularly heavy. So that was one of the things. Don't worry about that. People are fucking gross and will dig their hands into whatever, like, oh, I'll just scoop this rice into my, may have held God knows what plastic container. And that's how, you think Chipotle was bad about E. coli outbreaks. You get people shitting their brains out from salmonella contamination.
And that's the thing. And because like the zero waste grocery stores, they allow you to bring in anything. And all the articles tell you that, like, whatever you can bring in, jars, reusable bags, Tupperwares, as long as it's your own container, you can bring it in and fill it up. That weirds me out. Like, I like the idea of the zero waste. I feel like it needs to be regulated a little bit more. Like, cool, bring in your own stuff, but it needs to be regulated. Like, please don't come in with like some plastic bag that you've had underneath your kitchen sink. Like, these are the things I think of. Like, I feel like it needs to be regulated just a little bit more for sanitary reasons. Probably doesn't help that I just got off of the kid flu plague. So.
Oh, sure. You're a little more cognizant of it. But I think to close this bit, I think we picked this for shitty media of the week, not because it's irresponsible food reporting, but more in that I feel that it didn't quite go far enough to, address that things are going to be more expensive, which makes it less accessible. Food distribution costs and supply chain issues right now are already god awful.
Yeah.
And Abigail and I talked about that. I blamed her living in Texas. But I feel like things like this, that once they spread out into the more popular kind of news cycle, make people who can't afford or don't have access to these kinds of things even more guilty about their food buying habits, which might cause the exact opposite of what we want them to. And that, well, I can't afford zero waste, so I'm just going to buy in bulk macaroni and cheese boxes because I know that won't go to waste or whatever. And that defeats the purpose. So if you're interested, the link will be in the episode description, as it always is. So moving on to the food science, and then the kind of majority of our show is the concept of grocery stores and the idea of retail psychology and how grocery stores treat you and treat us like lab rats in a maze. And if we do the right thing, we get rewarded with candy bars at the checkout aisle. And I feel like a lot of this stuff, either people know kind of tangentially or even instinctually, how impulse buys work and how, they put those goodies at the end of the store by the checkout because you're way more likely to grab a Reese's cup or whatever if all you have to do is pick it up off the rack and put it right on the belt and it gets scanned, and then, well, shit, it got scanned, you got to buy it, rather than they don't put that stuff in the middle of the store. So starting, I wanted to start with, when you think about when you walk into a grocery store, Is it the same as walking out of a grocery store? Is it the same entrance? Is it the same door?
Yes.
No, it is not. Most grocery stores, if not all, the entrance and exit is completely physically separated from each other because a grocery store is intended to be a one lap trip in that you enter, and then you'll notice it now that we're talking about it, they shove you to the right. They shove you to the right going in, and there will be some sort of display or a florist or bakery or something to your immediate left when you go into the store that kind of diverts you like a river to the right. And so the entrances are always on the right-hand side of the store, the exits are on the left. And sometimes Walmart doesn't do that, but Walmart's weird. They're their own kind of thing.
The one I'm thinking of is one of our local stores here. It's Tops. And the one that we always shop to, I kid you not, there's like no difference. Like it's just like smack dab in the middle, and it's like everybody for themselves.
Well, then that's a very poorly designed grocery store.
But Wegmans is like huge, and like anybody that listens to this, everybody's gonna be like, yeah, Wegmans is exactly how you're explaining it. It's the entrances on the right, exits on the left, and everything, like you just go towards the right. And
yeah. So they flow that way most places, and we're looking at evidence from National Geographic, Columbia University studies, Shopify's article on retail psychology. A lot of places will put the bakery and florist near the entrance to evoke scent memories, much like Disneyland and Disney World are famous for pumping like cookie and cinnamon smells when you first walk into the park. It's a scent memory thing. It makes you feel welcome, makes you feel like home. Then, of course, you go into the produce section where everything's fresh and bright. If you'll also notice that's where the brightest lights in the store are, because they make the produce kind of pop, and things are arranged by like not only value and not only what they cost, but ease of use and ease of access. You know, the things that people don't like, the collard greens are going to be in the corner, whereas the apples usually are on the front. Pre-bagged stuff like apples, potatoes, citrus will always be farther away than the single fruits and veg because they cost more per unit. Usually the bagged ones end up being cheaper for that amount, which we'll get into later. Biggest thing with produce that bugs the living shit out of me, the spray systems. Like the water, the misters.
yes.
Do the misters do anything to keep the produce fresh, Barb?
No.
No, they do not.
They do not.
They make it's kind of like every soda or beer commercial or ad you've ever seen. Condensation on the outside of the bottle or can is connected to your hind lizard brain that's refreshing and fresh. And, you know, if it has water on it, it's nature, which is not true at all.
No.
It has nothing to do with the freshness of the fucking produce. And in fact, makes it rot faster because it's moisture. And without every single time that I go to this grocery store and try to get like parsley or any kind of herb.
Oh, yeah.
Every time, as soon as I go to grab it, the fucking spritzer comes on. And I have to grab my big giant bunch of parsley and shake it like an asshole. And I'm flinging water everywhere because not only is it going to make my parsley rot faster in the fridge, but it also weighs it down. And most things are sold by weight. And if they're soaked in fucking water,
you're paying for the water. Yeah.
Exactly. You're paying for the water that you already paid for in the prices of the groceries to begin with. So when at all possible, I would even go so far to be a complete weirdo. Bring a hand towel with you to the grocery store when you buy produce and fucking dry that shit off. Not only that, don't get the single-use produce bags. They are very wasteful. If you need to store produce when you get home, keep high-quality Ziploc bags, which you can, if you want to be weird, super weird, you can wash and reuse. We have a couple of things. We have one for bacon, one for Parmesan cheese, one for like peppers and onions that we don't necessarily wash because it's the same produce and the same thing in it over and over and over again, which is probably super weird. Please don't come at me and say that I'm gross. We don't keep things in there until they spoil, and then there's mold spores in it, and we put the new thing in it. But don't use if you can possibly avoid it, if you think it's gonna make things easier for, and I'm sure people that work in grocery stores are gonna yell at me like, I don't want to pick out 15 different Brussels sprouts and have to weigh them all together and they roll around. Sure, that sucks. For things that are like tiny, like green beans, don't just grab a handful of green beans and throw them in your cart. Like, that's a dick move. But things like if you're buying 2 or 3 potatoes, you don't need to put those in a bag. Like, they're big enough and substantial enough where you can just put them in your cart. Individual limes, lemons, like stuff like that, apples. Like I said, the pre-bagged apples, potatoes, onions are generally going to be cheaper by volume anyway. So go and get that. Do you buy like pre-bagged like potatoes and onions at all, or?
I buy like the pre-bagged like salt potatoes and like Yukon potatoes. Otherwise, like my sweet potatoes, I like to like really look at my sweet potatoes, get a good look, because like I would rather, because they are more expensive, I would rather know like I'm getting good quality instead of like buying a bag and I'm throwing out 50% of a bag.
That's a good point, because that's one of the things that like I don't buy onions at Aldi anymore because they only have the bags. Mm-hmm. And upon inspection, about half the ones, you're exactly right, about half the ones in the bag are not bad, but they're already kind of halfway peeled. So they're going to go bad faster. And you do get a little more kind of agency in the selection of your onion. Sometimes I want like a bigger onion and the bagged ones are generally smaller. So and this comes down to like the ultimate thing in produce especially is, and we've talked about this, like what is more valuable, your time or your money? I don't think anybody's time is so valuable that they need to buy pre-chopped onions. And I've mentioned this before, just fucking learn how to chop an onion.
And not just that, they are disgusting. I don't know if you've ever used them. I kid you not, I'm going to admit it, I used them. The pre-chopped onions. The smell, like the aroma was not right. Like it was the most awful experience of my life. And ever since then, I am like, I will chop I will smell like an onion if I have to. I will never again be that person. And if you're that person, I'm sorry, I'm attacking you.
Onion is a delicious smell. I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but like in that plastic container, it just smelled like when it was cooking. It just
rot. And that's taking under consideration, when they were chopped, when they were prepped. Prep kitchen people that have worked in kitchens or restaurants know that, if your prep guy in the morning didn't quite seal it all the way, you're going to get a little stank in there. So produce is, and the other thing I think a lot of people worry about too is organic produce, whether or not to buy organic. And we dwelled on this during the research pre-show, and we'll probably do a show way more in depth on organic stuff later, because there's a lot to pack, there's a lot to unpack, there's a lot to parse. I know we've mentioned before, like people or food producers have to pay money to entities to get certified organic. It's not just somebody comes in and does a checklist and then they get a stamp. It's much like anything with meat. Like getting graded, you have to pay for that. It's essentially accreditation for your food production process. You pay to have somebody come in and check to make sure that you're doing the right thing. So you can buy, if you trust, you can buy foods and produce that are produced organically under the standards that an organic label would give, but you don't end up paying as much because they don't pay for getting that certification. So if you're going to farmers markets, if you're able to, like we try to talk about, cut your food chain down, like make it smaller, you have the ability to ask the people who actually produce the food, hey, how do you grow this? Or how is it produced? And they're really they're not going to lie to you. It doesn't make any sense for them. If they're out in that kind of environment, they're proud of their products. They're proud of their production. So don't feel like farmers markets, because they're not labeled organic, are not as good as buying organic at the store. If you follow the quote Dirty Dozen list every year, this place called the Environmental Wellness Group, I think it was Environmental Wellness Group. Yeah. The EWG. The Dirty Dozen list comes out from this nonprofit that basically says these are the 12 most pesticide fruits and vegetables in your store. As an example, the 2022 list is strawberries, spinach, kale, mustard and collard greens, nectarines, apples, grapes, bell and chili peppers, cherries, peaches, pears, celery, and tomatoes. So for those of us who have even the barest understanding of how fruits and vegetables work, all of those fruits and veg are usually not consumed either by peeling. Like, there are things that you don't have to peel in order to eat, like a banana. They either don't have peels at all, like strawberries or cherries, or people are less likely, or because of how the particular produce is grown, needs more seeds, or how different species have different levels of pests that would need to be controlled by pesticides, generally speaking. So on that note, so this thing comes out every year, and basically their angle on it is this place is not a government entity. It's a nonprofit that does this and somehow became culturally relevant. But the problem with that is we've looked at it, right? That people avoid buying these things entirely because they think they're just like massive chemical laden, poison things. And that's not, I don't think that's the EWG's intent. I think people take it the wrong way because, shocker, people are dumb and take, things they read online poorly. But organic stuff has more to do with, to me, has more to do with the environmental impact than the end product necessarily. Like, the amount of stuff that gets washed off or rained off or ends up in the soil, running off into the water system, that's why I would venture more toward less pesticide shopping. Not so much that I'm worried about poisoning myself or my family, because if places were selling produce with so much pesticide on it that they were killing people, they wouldn't be in business. So it's way more impactful on the squirrels and the fish and the birds and things like that. So if you can, ultimately, I would say, and I think you can back me up on this, if you can afford to buy organic of your produce of choice, I would say go ahead and do that. I think that's fair, right?
It is, absolutely.
Because it is significantly more expensive to get organic stuff. And there's always ways to learn more about it. My wife and I used to have the rule about, it doesn't make sense to buy organic bananas because bananas have peels and you don't eat them, so it doesn't matter if they were sprayed or not. And then upon more research, pesticides get into the soil and get into the things that the plants grow out of. And banana peels are not completely, impervious to chemicals and things. So sometimes organics can be, at least with produce, specifically fresh produce and frozen, just things that grow in the dirt. If you can afford organic, it's probably better. It's never going to be worse than non-organic. I think that's probably safe to say. It's never going to be worse for you. But if you can't afford it, or if you don't have access to it, more importantly, don't feel like you're, poisoning your family by not buying organic. If you're that concerned about it, you can spend extra time washing things, and you don't have to wash them in anything wild, just a little bit of soap and water. Make sure you rinse it well, especially things that you're not going to peel. Spray things down, which is a generally just decent rule anyway. And then going back to the spritzers at the store, make sure you dry things before you put them away. And it takes a little more time. And but that goes back to like the money and time thing. If you're going to spend less money on the non-organic, you're going to have to spend a little bit more time if that residue is kind of what you're worried about.
Yeah.
So moving on from the produce section, we'll go into more detail about organic and non-organic later. Things, you go around the corner and then the produce section runs into a corner and then you're arranged to the left. Things are, brands pay more to the store chain to be displayed on end caps, which are the shelves and displays at the end of the aisle. Because your eye goes there, you stick out from the regular aisle shelves. Standard the thigh to eye concept at a average American adult's eye level, which is my average American male height at about 5'8". It is average, fuck you. That's the primo real estate. So you'll notice that's where the national brands are. That's where the high dollar value items are. Generally speaking, the less expensive items are on the bottom shelf because those items are less expensive because the brands don't pay to put them in the primo real estate. Store brands are generally below the premium brands. In my experience, and I would like your input on this too, with store and generic brands, largely because those recipes and those techniques are not proprietary, largely store brand stuff is as good, if not better, than national brands for significantly less cost.
Absolutely.
But certain things, and you'll only find this out from the brands and the things that you specifically buy, like store brand Cheez-Its are fucking gross.
Yes.
There is something in Nabisco or whatever Cheez-Its, like legit Cheez-Its, that makes them what they are. Because we've tried 4 or 5 different store brand cheese crackers and they suck. They're bland. They don't have like the cocaine addictive part of them where you can eat a whole family size box in a sitting. And no, fans of the show, they're not real food. They have a bunch of bullshit in them, but it just goes.
They're still delicious.
Right. And it goes into rule number 6, know your food. But things like generic, I would say, find, depending on what your family or what your home unit usually buys as far as your standard kind of grocery shopping stuff. If you've always been we buy Post cereal and, whatever name brand, like we only buy Hellmann's mayonnaise or whatever. I would venture to say the next time you go shopping, try the store brand. Try the generic brand. Or if you regularly shop at a store that doesn't have a generic kind of side of it, I don't know if any of those even exist anymore. Try swapping it out. See if you notice any difference. I would venture to say that 90% of the stuff you won't. And you'll save a significant amount on your grocery trips, which inflation is a really good thing to be doing right now.
Yes.
So try to avoid things that are eye level are going to be more higher priced. They're more national brands. Things that are kind of rarer or more niche are going to be on the top shelves. My biggest thing is more and more places now I've noticed are doing more detailed price tags on their shelves where they list how much things are. If they are nice enough to give you the price per ounce, I would say always look at that. You do have to do a little math sometimes, but something like I just taught my kids this the other day, buying hummus because I am bougie and I eat hummus and pita chips. The 8-ounce hummus was cheaper than the 10-ounce hummus, which makes sense because it's less. But the 10-ounce hummus price per ounce was actually less than the 8-ounce hummus. So it wasn't enough of a price difference. It's kind of like gas. Like I have never understood people who will drive miles out of their way to save 10 cents per gallon on gas.
Yeah, that makes no sense to me.
And it's basic math, right? Like not only are you probably burning more gas than the amount that you're saving to go to the other place, but how big is your gas tank that's any sort of meaningful savings?
Right.
Like 10 cents a gallon on a 10-gallon tank is $1. And like that, I don't get it. Like it's easier. It's actually probably better to go and just get the gas at the place that's on the way that you're already going.
Yeah.
So, if you're worried about saving, my grandma was one of those with groceries that it doesn't matter how much the serving size was. She was a literal penny pincher. If it was 98 cents, but the cashier rang it as 99, she would raise a fuss, which I guess is probably a generational thing, but she didn't live through the Depression. Like she was born in 1939, so it's not like she was probably raised that way. But that's the thing, and you do have to be cognizant of the price of things, but not, don't just blindly buy name brand stuff because you think it's the best, because it's not. They're the ones with the advertising budget that they pay money to. They have commercials and websites and things, and the store brand doesn't. The store brand doesn't promote shit. So that's why it's cheaper. Even so, sometimes too, like, does Wegmans have like a customer loyalty point program thing?
They do. It's not as good as Tops. I'll admit, like I like Tops better because like I can save so much, and then I get gas points, and like I can get like $1.75 off of gas, and I'm like, yeah. But what I don't like about Wegmans is how their store brand is like significantly more expensive than like national brands. It's very
What?
I'm dead serious. It's very backwards, and there are people who are like diehard Wegman fans. Like every like their only shopping is like at Wegmans, and like they're even like killing like even like the smaller brands. Like you can only find Wegman brands, and I'm a big stickler on that. Like I grew up poor, so like we always had like where I grew up, the name brand, the store brand was like Surefine, like Surefine Foods, and I still like will buy certain cereal, like, yes, really sugary, delicious, bad for me cereal. That isn't like a big name brand because it's better. Like some of the stuff is legitimately better, but not Cheez Its. Zach is right about that. You cannot mess with Cheez Its.
Yeah, it just there are certain things that even some brands or stores that I've been to have different tiers of generic store brand too. There's like
Yeah.
like Schnucks has their Culinaria blend, which is like their high end generic, and then there's the great value Walmart equivalent, and then there's even one before that that's like, is this a can of peas or is it dog food? We don't know, but you're only paying 9 cents a can for it, so that's on you. So that's right. So like that's kind of a thing, and grocery budgeting is always very tough. We have our list every week, and the thing with grocery stores that you also have to understand too is that they are much like casinos because it's a big time sink for a lot of people. I am a very slow cart. Like I will go and look at everything. I will wander every aisle, seeing what's new because they do change the layout.
They do.
It's never the same layout. Doesn't matter how many times you've been there. They will always move things because it makes you look around looking for the thing that was moved, which exposes you to more potential buys. But the biggest thing is, and I found this in this article from Columbia University, at around 23 minutes, once you're in the store for 23 minutes, shoppers on average start to make choices with the emotional parts of their brain instead of the logical. So like you convince yourself that it's okay to get this thing that wasn't on the list because it looks really good, or I could probably use that later, or it's on sale. And after 40 minutes, which is also coincidentally the average time of a weekly grocery trip, your brain stops responding to rational thoughts entirely, which then helps out the high margin impulse buy stuff at the register. Because if you look at something like a Reese's 2-pack of cups, it's like $2 or $3. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Or a Pringles or something like that. Or that's at Schnucks they put the bags of like trail mix that are right up front too, and those are like $9 for a half pound. So the whole point of a grocery store experience is to keep you in the store as long as possible. That's also why they put staples like milk, eggs, and bread at the other end from the entrance in this, one directional loop. Someplace like Schnucks, they don't anymore. They got rid of it. They would have right up front. They did have right up front a little kind of half cooler that had a limited selection of milk, eggs, sodas, salad, stuff like that. So people could literally run in, grab one thing, and come out.
That's amazing.
Right? And I was always very appreciative of that when like we had kids in the car and we needed a gallon of milk. And that kind of goes into things like you can go to a gas station and buy a gallon of milk and walk out and they don't care, but it's $6. Like it's twice as much as you would spend for it at the grocery store. So it's again, price, convenience, time kind of deal. One of the things that I learned in researching this that was really fascinating to me as a left-handed person is the entire concept of the stores being arranged this way in a counterclockwise kind of right-handed way is that 90% of people are right-handed, and it makes sense. And we drive on the right side of the road in the United States and pretty much everywhere except for the weird British places. So we are conditioned to move in that way. People go down the aisles the same way they drive on the road. And if you go down the aisle on the right side of the aisle, your right hand is next to the shelf. So it's easier for you to grab things and put them in your cart if you're right-handed. Oh yeah, and you're doing it. Yeah, I can see the like yeah, it makes sense that way. But it's weird because I've never thought about that because I'm left-handed. So going through a grocery store for me is essentially backwards because I want to go on the other side of the aisles because I'm left-handed and scoop things in, and I always run into, old women who are pushing their carts too slow.
I don't know. I'm a monster. Like there's times like how you did like the 23 minutes and the 40 minutes. Like I start off, like organizing all my like stuff in my cart, going down the right side. And then at some point I just like throw all caution to the wind and I'm going backwards. I'm going on the left side. I become a monster. Just like I'm bored.
And that's one of the things too, if you get to the produce section and realize, oh, I forgot a lemon, and then you turn around, you feel like a fish going upstream.
Yes.
It feels unnatural because you've been conditioned to go a certain way. Because you'll notice things like you never see the store from that angle. You're not supposed to. You're not supposed to see the store from that angle. It's like seeing the backside of a house of mirrors. So a couple of things. Yeah, so a couple of things too. Before I get into the tips, you brought up a good point pre-show that a lot of kind of bougie nutritionist, wellness guru types, which we here at Foodball, we call you on your bullshit, say, the best way to do grocery shopping is to stay away from the middle of the store where all the aisles and the prepackaged and the shelf-stable stuff is, and stick to the produce, the fresh meat, the dairy, and that's it. So what say you to those nutrition gurus, Barb?
Well, after some research on this, and since we're a family show and, we really pride ourselves on being a family show, fuck you. There are things that like you have your whole grains, you have your butters, and I'm not talking like butter for your bread. I'm talking like nut butter, peanut butter, almond butter. Those are all in your middle aisles. This is where you have to use, I don't even want to say common sense. You have to start doing your research and reading labels and reading the health, like what's in this, what's the saturated fats, what's the trans fats, like all of this is going to matter. Not everything has to be on the outside, especially, and I'm a stickler on this, shop how you can afford. If you can't afford those fresh fruits, go on the inside. And I've said it before, get the canned veggies or get frozen. Frozen is so much better. It really is. But if you can't afford frozen, cans okay. But read your labels.
And really, too, sometimes depending on where you're at, obviously prices are anecdotal and regional. A can of peas and a bag of frozen peas, in my experience, are not all that different, if at all different in price.
Mm-mm.
Fresh peas taste better, regardless of if they are better. Because again, your food is not a math problem. You shouldn't be counting things. Buy and eat real food. Fresh is mostly better, not all the time. Frozen is almost as good, if not better, most of the time. If you focus on those things and just eat real food, the nutrition end of it will just come and you won't have to think about it.
Exactly.
But thinking, the aisles in the middle of a grocery store are there because those items are shelf stable. It is a practical arrangement. Not everything else is insidious, but it's not the fact that they themselves are put there that's the insidious part. It's how they're arranged on the shelves. You wouldn't put rice in the cooler because you don't need to. It's shelf stable. It can be at room temperature. Just like you wouldn't put the butter in the middle of the store because it would all melt. That's dumb. But don't think that you only have to stick to the outside. Be cognizant of what you're buying. And I think you make a good point too, is stick to your budget. Stick to what you can logically afford. Don't stretch yourself out. It's more important, and we say this all the time too, it's more important to know what you're doing with your ingredients. Sometimes, a good tip is to, if you can stretch a little bit more for a higher tier quality, if you know what you're doing with that higher tier quality, you can end up actually eating less and then making it spread out more. Something like a better quality steak, if you can get a $6 sirloin or an $8 or $10 sirloin that are the same size, and you think, oh, well, that's ridiculous. Why would I pay $2 or $3 or $4 more for the same amount of meat? But if you spend that $8 on the shitty sirloin and eat the whole thing, which is twice what you should probably eat for that amount of meat. And if you buy the better quality one and only eat half of it or make it 2 meals, you're actually getting more bang for your buck out of the higher quality because you can eat less of the better thing because it's better. You don't have to eat 47 French fries when you can have delicious mashed potatoes that you made yourself. So don't look at everything being more expensive as prohibitive, or, just learn. If you have questions, if you're at the store, listeners, and you have a legitimate question, fucking DM us. Like, you can ask. Like, I am legitimately serious. If you're at a grocery store and you have a question about food, send me a DM on Twitter or tweet at me or tweet at us on Instagram, or not tweet at us on Instagram, but DM us on Instagram. Say, I am choosing between this and this. What should I pick? And then I will literally sit there and answer because I am a social media person. I am literally attached to my phone 24 hours a day. Ask my wife. I will help you through it. And then you know the answer to that question going forward. And then there will be another question, and then we'll go through it. We'll work on it together.
There is no dumb question either.
Exactly.
I want the viewers to know this. Like,
exactly.
Everybody starts someplace with learning.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with it. I would much rather one person learn to buy X item over Y item because A, B, and C than we've done our job.
Or here's a good example. Zach, why should you not buy garlic in a 3-pack?
Because you can't see the condition of the garlic, and they're usually smaller, and they're more expensive because you're paying for the packaging. Things like, and those are just basic stuff. And even things that you think would be super obvious, like make a grocery list. Not many people do, or not, they make, I do the same thing. I notice, and because it's true, if I have a list that I have thought out ahead of time, whether it's, things that we make this excuse to ourselves every week that we're going to meal plan. Or we're going to say we're going to eat this on Monday, this on Wednesday. It never fucking works because you have kids, you have a life, shit happens. But if we've gotten better at is having a nebulous idea of we're going to get 1 or 2 proteins, and we make sure we have our pantry stocked of like pastas and grain, and we have some vegetables in the fridge. And I'm a good enough cook, obviously, that I can figure something out with those parts. If you're starting out, it might make more sense for you to say, I'm going to have spaghetti this night. I'm going to have a pork chop this night. I'm going to allow myself to get Taco Bell this night or whatever. And then you can shop like that. When you knew me, when I was single in the Navy, I would grocery shop every day for that night only.
Yep.
I would go and get, which is insane. That is completely expensive because it's nuts. But if you can do that and that's what works for you, do that. Because I think a lot of people worry about buying a bunch of food and, like you mentioned, contributing to food waste, especially with produce. You buy a bunch of things because you're jazzed up to do all this vegetable, and then they end up getting rotten, needing to be thrown away. So that's frozen is good for that. Make a list, whether it's with an app, or I like a piece of paper because I like to trust myself, and it's actually easier for me to write out a list than it is to type it into an app.
You know what else works? Texting yourself. As dumb as that sounds, just text yourself. Now you have the list on your phone.
That's not a bad idea either. And then you have to pay for stupid premium shopping list apps. There are a lot of places now, depending on if you get your website, if you do your recipes from certain websites. I know Serious Eats has it. All Recipes has it. You can actually save a recipe and it will create a shopping list for you if you upload several. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I think the other biggest thing, 2 biggest things, make a list and don't be afraid to go to more than one store.
Yes.
Hopefully for those of us who are lucky enough to not live in a food desert, we have options where you can go to a Walmart, a Target, Food Lion, Piggly Wiggly, whatever. Everybody has a regional chains, everybody has national chains. But I think the trap that they set for you is that the feeling of convenience of being able to get everything in one place, you sometimes might sacrifice quality. You might actually pay more for things. You may settle for, well, I couldn't get this here, so I guess I'm just going to have to do without. And it takes, I think grocery shopping is scary to people, especially just those living on their own for the first time, or getting into buying food for yourself for the first time. You want that because then it's less stressful. But I have found as I have gotten older that certain items I have to get at certain places.
Yes.
As an example, we have Aldi, which is, I used to think was like the poor people grocery store because you have to bag your own stuff. They don't have like plastic grocery bags. But I realized that the reason that is because it's so much cheaper. It's so much cheaper. And the quality mostly is as good, if not better, than a like standard grocery store. But I also know, having shopped at Aldi enough times, there are certain things that they either don't carry or can never find or just aren't as good. Like we talked about the onions. They also don't carry like bronze cut spaghetti or very specific things. So I know those I have to get at a different store. I know that Walmart carries certain specific ingredients that I don't necessarily need all the time, but I know that that's where they're available. So don't be afraid to look in the circulars that you inevitably get in the mail. Just look through them. And whether you want a meal plan based on your what you want to eat, sometimes I take a look at the circulars and see what's on sale, see what's available. If it's and you'll find sometimes like seasonally too, like leading into the Super Bowl, chicken is always on sale because everybody makes chicken wings.
Yes.
And going into the 4th of July, things like hot dogs and hamburgers are on sale because everybody grills out for 4th of July. We're coming up on Memorial Day. Meat, there are certain times when meat goes on sale. And meat is by far the hugest percentage, I would think, of most people's grocery bills, those of us who eat meat. So there is the case to be made that going meatless just for an economic thing is okay. And I can get behind that. That's fine. I'm poor. I'm all about saving money. But there are ways to get around that. So make a list and don't be afraid to go to more than one store, because the more you do it and the more you get into like a swing of how you do it, and especially if you don't spend, and this ties into the shopping slower thing that stores want you to do. If I go into Aldi knowing they're not going to have this handful of stuff, so I don't waste time looking for it.
Yeah.
Which ends up in me buying other dumb shit. And then so I go into the more expensive store knowing, okay, I'm only here for this handful of things and I know where they are, probably. And then I'll go and find those. And so it becomes, if you're scared of grocery shopping, don't be. It's not, it's a game. You're playing the same game against the store. You can, hopefully you've learned some things today about what rules they're operating under. If you go in armed with this knowledge, if you have a list, if you know where the hacks, I hate to use the term hacks, but if you know what their rules are, if you know where you can shave, and I talked about penny pinching, but sure, 10, 20, 30 cents doesn't seem like a lot, but over the course of $100 or over the course of 5 or 10 grocery trips, it does add up. And, there's a lot of, and I say this all the time too, marketing. Marketing is evil. You are paying sometimes not for a better quality or a more sustainable product. You're paying for that $100 million ad campaign on Hulu to get you to buy things.
Yeah.
And I think if you stick true to what you're trying to buy, and if you are knowledgeable about what you're trying to buy, and you can not escape the entirety of the grocery store evil marketing machine, but you can, it's in the drug community, they call it harm reduction. You can reduce the harm that the grocery experience does to you and your budget and your family. So hopefully these tips have been helpful. If you have, I am 100% serious about if you are ever at the grocery store, if you follow us on social media and you have a question, DM it. Whether it's the show account or our personal accounts on Twitter or the show account on Instagram, whatever.
We will get you the answers and we'll make sure
Right.
that you feel comfortable doing those.
Exactly. Don't beat yourself up if you can't afford it. Oh, we've almost forgot. What is the most important grocery shopping rule?
Oh, don't go grocery shopping hungry.
Amen, sister. Under no circumstances should you ever go to the grocery store on an empty stomach.
Not a good idea.
It is a terrible idea, to the point where if you need to, just have a fucking granola bar in the car. And if you notice, if you pull up and you park and you know that you haven't eaten, eat a granola bar. It's the kind of the rip off the Snickers thing, like you're not you when you're hungry. You spend a shit ton more money at the grocery store when you're hungry.
Yeah.
It just makes sense. Like, it would be, don't go clothes shopping when you're naked, because you're incapable of making fully informed choices if you have a need, if you have a body physiological need.
Yeah, like I won't even take my kids. Like if I have to go grocery shopping with my kids, it's like, you guys are eating before we leave. Like, I don't trust you guys.
Right, because we can't be trusted to not listen to our hindbrains when we're out there, especially with things like the lighting and the wet produce and the packaging that looks so delicious. Oh, look at this, easy in bag 20-second Parmesan Alfredo noodle. Fucking don't buy that shit.
That sounds terrible.
At this point, right. At this point, I feel like after 6 episodes, I could trust most of our listeners to not do that. But, you never know. So hopefully these grocery tips have helped. If you do have questions, please let us know. If there's anything that we missed, I'll do my best to fact check as I edit the episode, which I have now become super fond of doing. This has been this week's Epedition.
I like that word. Epedition.
Right? This week's episode of Foodball has been why grocery stores are the worst. Hopefully we've assuaged some of your fears, given you some helpful tips the next time you go to the store. And remember, you're never grocery shopping alone. You have us in the hand, in the back. That is terrible.
You have us in your back pocket.
In your back pocket. There you go. I think it was a portmanteau of in the palm of your hand and in your back pocket.
You got it.
Either way, whether we're on your ass cheek or in your hand, we're available to you, because I know you guys are not shopping without your phone. So, until next time, this has been Foodball. Remember, humans cook real food.